use one of them a little bit now and then, so he'll be our guardian angel. A lot of people say you don't have a guardian angel. Grandpa, he got one. He's always had one. He kept him pretty busy at times. I'm like Grandma. I've always depended on prayer and the inspiration that comes through prayer, and I've always tried to listen after I prayed to see what I was supposed to do. Sometimes I didn't do what I hadn't.
What you said you did.
The thing that I had been prompted to do, I've always found out that if I'd had done what I was prompted to do, I'd have been all right. One time, Van Holyoke, we were starting the roundup. Everybody, all the cowboys on the roundup have anywhere from 10 to 12 head of horses. And we was issuing horses, getting ready, and Van Holyoke said, "Man," he said, "I wish I had that sorrel mare." And I said, "Well, where is she?" "Oh," he said, "she's down on the Apache Indian reservation." Well, I said, "When did she get down there?" "Well," he says, "she's been down there 3 years." Well, I said, "Let's go down and get her." Why, he said, "You talk like you knew where she was at." Well, I said, "I do. You just told me. You told me she's on the Apache Indian reservation." "Why, man," he said, "that covers thousands of miles down there." He said, "There's thousands of horses down there, and she's been down there for 3 years. You talk like you're going to go get her." And I said, "Well, she's still leaving tracks, isn't she?" Well, he said, "Sure, if she's still alive." Well, I said, "Let's go down and get her." And he said, "Do you really think we can find her?" Well, I said, no problem. I said, "Sure we can find her." So the next morning we loaded a couple of horses in the horse trailer and headed down to the Apache Indian reservation. That's rough country down there. That's the biggest cow ranch in Arizona. It's about, let's see, it reaches from just out of Sholo till you get down the other side of Salt River Canyon. Goes down to Molly Griff's ranch, so it's about, must be 150 miles long and about 80 miles wide. All big canyons, rough canyons. Some of them, it takes you all day long to get across one of them. And just as blue as looking at the sky, looking off in some of them. And have to find where you can get off, because there's lots of bluffs. Some of them 100 feet to the bottom of the bluff, some of them 300 or 400 feet to the bottom, some of them a lot farther than that. But we unloaded the horses where Van's horse went through the fence. That was on the head of the Civic Canyon. And we rode and we rode, and we saw a lot of horses and thousands of horse tracks, and we kept cutting across the country. And we'd come to a bunch of horse tracks, and I'd look the horse tracks all over. I'd tell Van, I said, "She's not with that bunch." They said, "How do you know? You never have seen her." I said, "That doesn't make any difference. She's not with that bunch. I'll know her tracks when I see them." Yeah, he said, "I don't know how you're going to do it." And I said, "Don't worry, I'll know her tracks when we see them. We'll just keep riding and looking at the horse tracks till we find your mare's track." So we rode and we rode all day long. We saw lots of horses and thousands of horse tracks, and finally headed off and dropped off into the west prong of Civic Canyon, and got down in the bottom, horse tracks all over in the bottom. Well, he said, "Start looking." So we started across the canyon, cutting across the canyon, looking horse tracks. Pretty soon there was a horse track. I said, "There's where your mare went, right there." He said, "You sure?" I said, "Yeah, that's where she went all right." And well, he said, how do you know? And I said, well, I said, I've been trying, I've been listening all day to somebody to tell me when I come to the right horse track, and that's all I've been waiting for. For that prompting that that's her track. And I said, that's her track. Well, he said, I said, what do we do? And I said, we just follow them on down the canyon. So we followed down horse tracks down the canyon for a couple of miles, and pretty soon we could see a horse standing out there in the flat. And so we stopped. We were sitting there on our horse and looking around. Pretty soon there's another horse or two come out of the brush out in the flat, and then another horse come out in the flat. And the horses didn't know we was anywhere around. They were still a quarter of a mile away from us before there. Pretty soon, Van, he grabbed me by the shoulder and he said, there's my mare, there's my horse. I said, I told her she was there. Well, he said, what do we do now? And I said, well, we'll go back, I'll go back out of the canyon and come down on that next ridge down there and back into the canyon down below the horses. You just wait here. After you give me time to get down into the canyon down there, while you bring them down to me just as fast as they can run. And I said, when they get to me, they'll already have run a quarter of a mile at least, and she'll be halfway winded, and I'll just come out from behind a tree there and I'll rope her before she can get away. So that's what we did. I went back out of the canyon and followed down the next ridge down and come into the canyon about, at least a quarter of a mile below the horses. And I sat there. I looked the situation all over, and the trail made a bend across the canyon up against a big, what we call a cut bank, where the water washed the bank all out. The bank was about 20 feet high. You couldn't get away from me there, and there was a big pool of water laying out there to the on the other side of the bend of the trail. So I just get over on the other side of that pool of water. The water was only running about 6-8 inches deep, and some places foot deep, and other places it wasn't much of a river. And there was a nice bushy tree over on the other side of the water, and I could just cut across that water, and she couldn't get away from me because she'd be up against that high bank. She'd have to stay on the trail and couldn't get away from the trail. So I got all ready for Van to bring the horses, and after a while here I heard them coming. Boy, they was just a thundering along. And I come out from behind that tree, and I just crowded right up through that bunch of horses. They must have been 40 head of wild horses in the bunch, and she was right up in the middle. And so I worked my way up to her, and I throwed, and it went right over her head, right where it was supposed to be, and I jerked back on the rope. And just as I jerked on the rope, she throwed her head down between her chest. She'd been rope before, and when she felt that rope hit her neck, she knew she needed to dodge if she got out of it. And a wild horse, he never throws his head down because he's never been roped before. And when I yanked on the rope, she throwed her head down, and when I yanked it, just brought the rope up just above her nose, just below her eyes. You know, I was already stopping, and it just kind of throwed her up like that in the air, and the rope popped off. And away she went, and I'd already let half a dozen horses go by me because I knew I had her. And so I was still behind some other horses, and when they went on around that cut bank, they went up that next draw up to the left. And so it was a narrow bottom draw, and we just couldn't get by the horses to get up to where she was at. She was up toward the leading time. We got up another couple of miles up that draw. Why, our horses was winded, so we couldn't catch anything anyway.
What'd you do?
And